bio that everybody can get access to. Tanner is currently serving a 4-year term as the Utah County Commissioner, which is the legislative, executive, and quasi-judicial body of the county. His priorities are to enhance the level of transparency, efficiency, and fiscal responsibility within Utah County government. He also serves as a JAG officer in the Utah Army National Guard. Prior to this public service, Tanner's private sector career focused on evaluating and structuring large-scale mergers and acquisitions. He began his career with HGGC, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, and later joined the global law firm Kirkland and Ellis LLP, where he advised his clients on complex M&A transactions. After time as an executive with publicly traded and growth stage companies, Tanner established his own firm, Ainge Advisory. Tanner received his Juris Doctor from Northwest University School of Law and his Bachelor of Arts in International Studies from Brigham Young University with a minor in Asian Studies. He went on to live overseas in China and study Mandarin Chinese. He also served as a missionary in Ghana and has remained involved in humanitarian and entrepreneurial initiatives in West Africa. Tanner and his wife, Heidi, have been married for 15 years and have 5 children, 3 sons and twin daughters, and currently lives in Alpine, Utah. The one thing it doesn't say in here, Tanner, is that your wife is significantly more talented than you are, but that's pretty much anyone.
That's a given, yeah.
In our position. Tanner is a great friend of mine. I've always looked up to Tanner, and just an honest, good person. And I thought it would be a great experience to have Tanner kind of discuss statistics and things that can help our business. Tanner was a licensed real estate broker in the state of California before moving here to Utah. So before we start, how long were you in real estate, Tanner, before, like how many years total? I know you have investment properties and things like that, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, I really wasn't, I didn't really kind of utilize my license all that much when I was a broker. At that time, I worked for acquisitions of nursing homes for a couple of publicly traded companies. And so we were constantly dealing with commercial brokers as we were buying those either sites for nursing home locations or, just acquiring actively operated nursing homes. And so it was helpful from time to time to have my license, so I got it. But I haven't really been in the day-to-day profession like all of you on this call.
But you do understand, which makes it awesome. Okay. So you have such a successful background in law, business development, investments, structuring and managing large acquisitions, just to name a few. Why or what interested you in politics?
Well, I mean, first, let me just say, it's kind of a bummer that we're having to do this over Zoom. I mean, knowing Tim, and now you got your flowing long hair. I mean, I thought you'd be running up and down the aisles, some high energy with this crowd, but I guess we'll have to settle for boring me over Zoom. On politics, that's a good question. I think I probably have to go back a little further in my life and just realize, growing up in a family that was more oriented towards professional sports than business, I realized probably later than I should have, but nonetheless still realized at some point before I was 18 that, sports was not going to be my world. And so I kind of really thought, what do I want to do? And I really kind of looked for those around that I looked up to find different kind of heroes and examples. And in that phase, yeah, people who had success in business, I looked up to, but it wasn't necessarily their financial success that really resonated with me as much as these people were so capable, and they often were able to just provide value to whatever they attached themselves to, whether that was serving on a school board or on a nonprofit. And because some of those skill sets are so transferable. And so I set my sights on that early on. And I think that was just kind of part of who my mentors were in life, is they always found a way to kind of get involved. Now, as it relates to me deciding, that it was actually time for me to jump in, it was interesting that I think it comes down to Utah and a pretty unique model that we have here in this state. Having lived all over, I felt fortunate to be able to resettle back here. And I think there's a few things that we get right. I like to call it our big heart, small government model. And I just feel pretty passionately that we need to be an example of this, continue it in Utah and be an example of it for the rest of the country, because it's so critical. And just a couple of things there are, first, that you actually have responsible, small functioning government. So, you actually have a balanced budget, right? You keep your fiscal house in order. All you have to do is look at, I've lived in Chicago, I lived in California. Those two, Illinois and California are essentially going to be bankrupt. I've pretty much lost hope. I suppose if someone jumped in with an enormous level of urgency and they had the political will to do hard things, maybe they could get it going in the right direction. But instead, every year it gets worse and worse. So it's just a death spiral. And here, Utah's still doing that right. And we can't ever let that get away from us. I think second, having a strong economy that provides opportunity for everyone. I'm a capitalist. I believe in the free markets. I think that this is absolutely critical. And this is an area where, we need to make sure our regulations are modern and common sense. We need to make sure that our tax policy is competitive and low and allows business to thrive. And there are some people who say, oh, that only helps the big business, or that only helps the top 1%. But one of the things I love about the state of Utah is that our economy proves that wrong. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates, and there's been a few studies that have actually shown that we're the most upwardly mobile. More people are leaving poverty and low income to middle class. And so I think that's the narrative that we need across the country. And I love that about our state. And then just the last part is, if you're going to believe in limited government and you want good outcomes, I think you have to acknowledge that government isn't the answer to everything. In actuality, I think it's our values that hold us together. John Adams said that this Constitution was made for a moral and a religious people and was wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And so it's like, if government's going to step out of the way, something else needs to pull it together. In our state, we have high levels of volunteerism, charitable contributions, two-parent households, the fabric of our society that really has allowed for these good outcomes. And so anyway, I think these are some of the things that we needed to export. And so I wanted to jump in and be a part.
Very cool. That's very cool. And that falls in line with Gary Keller's statement of that balance, right? Where capitalists and also family and honesty, integrity, and all those things that really should be a part of your business and what you're growing. I think that's just like a perfect marriage there. So why this role? What are your priorities in this role, and why the county commissioner? Why the passion? Why that aspect of politics?
So on the county commission, I wish this was the first role I ran for. Unfortunately, I had run for Congress and lost. And I was just probably gonna just jump right back into my business, and that was fully our intention. But Utah County, it's off the charts on all of the positive metrics of what's going on in our economy and the country. But it was pretty embarrassing. For 2 consecutive terms, we had county commissioners that had problems with the law or unethical behavior, sexual harassment claims. And I just thought, this is absolutely ridiculous for a county that is thriving in all these areas we just talked about. So a group of community leaders kind of reached out to me and said, listen, we know you could win if you did it. And that way we can just kind of clear out some of these actors that we've had in the past. And so that's really why I considered and ultimately decided to run. I think the other exciting thing about this position was when I put my venture capital hat back on is, normally like Warren Buffett, when he's investing in a company, he wants to deploy capital. And so he likes to see, okay, there's really a couple criteria that he wants. Is the industry good? Are there the right tailwinds and the right trends? And Utah County, we can talk about this later from a real estate perspective, but is one of the hottest markets around. And we know that this growth is going to continue. And so our ability to actually plan for the future is very high, and to invest that capital. The other thing Warren Buffett looks for is management. And unfortunately, Utah County had bad management. And so wanted to get in and help fix this. I mean, can you imagine on the flip side, having to be on the city council or mayor of, for example, like the city of Detroit, where people are leaving, you don't know the growth trends, and you need to invest in some infrastructure, but it's not clear are they going to be here. Here in this state, in this county, people are going to be here, right? We have the highest rate of family formation. It's not going anywhere. And our economy is as competitive as any of our neighboring major markets. And so it's going to continue.
Yeah. That's, I mean, all of our agents that are on, not just in this office that you see, but the whole state, we're seeing just an abundance of buyers and not enough houses being sold. And so the just mass people exodus leaving those kind of areas coming here has been, our agents are filling it and multiple offers and crazy stuff. All right. So on these priorities, how have you rated yourself so far? Has it been 1 year? Is that how long it's been?
I've been in for about 2 years.
Oh, it's 2 years. Okay. So what's your scorecard look like as far as your own personal accountability or judgment?
Yeah, I will actually try to share something here. So I have made, I believe that any organization, can you see that?
Yep.
I believe that any organization should have clear goals and accountability. So I publicly put out my goals in each of these years. So the first year, one of the things that I knew going in is that we had major budget problems in the county, and we can get into that. There was years of neglect. And so first, adopting a new budget process to ensure performance-based measurements and multi-year forecasting. We adopted policies that got rid of ethics and conflict of interest issues. I had mentioned some of the problems we had with county commissioners in the past, so we put that in place. Updated purchasing and approval requirements just to streamline the effectiveness of county government. Pass a fiscally responsible budget for 2020, which could actually replenish our reserves and allow us to plan for the future. We can talk more about that, the budget and property tax. I don't really know the makeup of your group today, Tim, how many of your agents are more statewide or how much are in the county, but I know people have a lot of questions about the budget and property tax in the county. And I think there are some general principles about how they work in the state that we could cover if the chat box or if you think folks really want to. So those were kind of the big ones for 19. And then for this year, really there's a lot of the similar, reinforcing outcome-based budgeting, continuing to restrain spending. The goal is so that we can pass a balanced budget here on this fourth one this year. So last year we passed the first balanced budget in 4 years.
Wow.
And that's how bad they had let the finances get. But this year we want to pass it while lowering the tax rate instead of the increase that we had to go through last year. This is an interesting one that we can talk to. I think that some of your team may be interested in is enhance the attractiveness of our county through stewardship of our tourism related dollars. So investing in our canyons, parks, Utah Lake. We've made some recent announcements of investments along the Utah Lake shoreline. I mean, we have this incredible asset in our community. And for too long, it's kind of been, there's a small segment of our population who loves running along the trails, but it's kind of been featured and maintained kind of like the armpit of the county instead of our choicest national treasure or local treasure. So we're trying to invest there, and we can talk about that. And then Smart Justice Initiative. This is one that may not have as much interest to your group, but it's important because criminal justice, prosecuting felonies, operating our county jail, having public defenders for the indigent, that makes up about 75% of our budget in the county. And so, and I think everyone has someone in their life who has struggled with drug addiction or the law in one way or another. And I think it's important that we find ways to get people in and out of the system that actually changes behavior and gets them back on their feet. And in so doing saves taxpayer dollars, because unfortunately, if anyone who's followed kind of the jail data, there's a very high percentage who are just right back in and out of that revolving door. And that's not helpful for anyone. So those are some of the goals. I'll report at the end of the year how we did on 2020, but we were able to achieve these goals in 2019.
Very cool. And as a culture that is specific in their goals and achieving goals and measuring and taking accountability, that's a big thing here. And so, and I'll emphasize what Tanner mentioned. If you guys do have questions, let's not go far politically, but as far as taxes and things like that, I am curious though. You mentioned Utah Lake and the shorelines. Has there been any issues come across your table with Geneva and soil I know there's been some questions with agents in the office as far as the EPA and some of the soil and the movement and the cleanup of that. Is that how deep into detail has that gone from your end or your perspective?
Look, I think that you're going to see significant development there in that area on the old Geneva site. Vineyard is the fastest growing city in America right now.
Wow.
And, that's going to continue as that site gets its development moving along. Vineyard was one of the sites where we just approved, I want to say the county tourism fund put in $3 million, but through a private developer and the city's match dollars, I think there's closer to $20 million going in on infrastructure improvements. We announced investments in Saratoga Springs and American Fork Boat Harbor, and Saratoga Springs kind of beach park. So look, I'm supportive of the longer term efforts. There's a lot that we can do in terms of, I think I see a question here about the bridge or about dredging Utah Lake. I think those are all possibilities, but one of the things I didn't want to do was stop doing the things we can do now while we're waiting for some of these longer term projects, because some people like to complain about the water quality, and my whole thing is, okay, imagine the city of Chicago. For those of you who traveled there, I lived there for a while, so I love the lakefront developments that they have. And Lake Michigan, you can go in downtown Chicago. They have great beachfront and walking and boardwalks along Lake Michigan. But guess what? At most times of the year, people aren't actually swimming. People aren't in the water. That's not the only thing that makes a lakefront attractive. And the water is safe and healthy. I mean, we wish it would clear. We wish it was less murky. But I'm just saying right now, if we had nice parks and trails and infrastructure and retail along that lake, we would all enjoy being out there, enjoying the breeze and along that shoreline. And so I think those are some of the immediate things that are happening. And by the way, when we do that as a community, I think that's where there's going to be the political will, where, okay, more and more people realize how amazing this asset is, and we should maybe invest a little bit more in cleaning up the water quality and doing those dredging projects. So I think it all kind of feeds together.
Very cool. You just probably made the day of 80% of the people that live or sell homes or list homes in that area, because that's as you said, the fastest growing city. That's amazing to me. I did not know that. That's really cool. All right, well, here's a little transition, and this was actually a big question brought up to me that I was hesitant to go into, but I'm grateful that you were open to discussing this, and that's Prop 9. So first of all, can you define it simply? I'm not a very intelligent person. Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS principle works great. So give us your definition. What is Prop 9? And you've been involved with it, I know. And yeah, I'd love to hear your
Prop
breakdown.
9 is, here's the basic choice that's in front of the voter this year. We can choose to maintain the existing form of government at the county level, which is a 3-member full-time county commission government. So there are 3 of us, we all work full-time, and we are the legislative and executive body. We kind of wear both hats in that regard. And there's no geographic districting. So theoretically, all 3 of us could be from the city of Vineyard. I'm not sure those in Lehigh and Spanish Fork would feel great about that. And that right now it's actually okay, but in theory, they could all be from one spot. The new form of government that's being proposed is it would go to 5 part-time county council members who would be elected out of 5 separate geographic districts. So it guarantees that each of those 5 districts in the county will always have 1 representative. And that's the legislative body. And then we would have a separate executive, that is the county mayor, who would be the full-time executive. And so for the first time, that would introduce a separation of the executive and legislative powers and have a county mayor and a council with geographic districts. So voting yes on Prop 9 is to move to this council mayor form of government. No on Prop 9 would be to maintain the existing 3-member commission.
So we're equaling out the power in some aspect as far as one city controlling a majority of choices.
Well, I mean, I think geographic districting is a big part of this. The other thing is there's a lot of misinformation out there. The cost of the government is actually less under the new form, because if you add up the salaries of the 3 full-time members versus 5 very part-time with 1 county mayor, the new government actually costs 45% less just on the government officials' salary difference and benefits. So, but I also think for me, this is a big issue because in your organization, anyone who's been part of a successful organization, you have to have a separation from, I will compare the legislative body to the board of directors of a company, right? The board is important. It's important to have people on the board who come together to set quarterly goals, to approve major things like a merger, to approve set major vision. But on a day-to-day basis, you have to have one CEO to carry forward that vision and actually get things done. In county government, the 3 of us are the legislative body, but then we also on the day-to-day are supposed to be like a 3-headed CEO. And it creates all sorts of dysfunction. You just can't have 3, you can't govern by committee on the day-to-day small things. And we can get more into that if people are interested in this topic, but that's why every city in this county, a lot of people in the private sector, our state legislators are frustrated with what it's like interacting. They don't have a single point of contact that they can get a clear direction from. And so 20 out of the 22 mayors have endorsed this, chambers of commerce, majority of our state legislators. And so people have been working on this change for a long time and they're ready. But it's all in the voters' hands. So we'll see what the ballot happens.
I don't know if you saw the questions come up. Clay and also Dean brought up. Interesting. It's in your best interest not to change, right? As far as that goes, but fiscally or financially speaking, like what?
Yeah.
Those,
well, I mean, look, that's actually one of the things that I've wanted to push forward is when this first happened, I think that one of the reasons, I think it's sound policy. And I think one of the reasons it hasn't been sent to the voters in the past was because commissioners wanted to keep their jobs. And, I wasn't going to do that. So when this came forward, I actually said, look, because we all have a conflict of interest, let's set up an independent board and let them recommend. So academics came together, business leaders came together, they studied this and they recommended moving to the form of government in Prop 9. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to follow it. I don't care if it has an impact on my job. And then now people, because I've been an active proponent of it now, people are saying, okay, well, now you're doing it out of your self-interest because you want to be county mayor, which is not true. And I've come out and publicly stated that I will not run for county mayor if this passes. But I would like to see it pass because I think this is part of fixing the dysfunction that's kind of plagued our county government.
Imagine that, someone in politics that actually cares about the greater good. I didn't think that existed. I thought that was a impossibility, but we had an Ainge in there. That's why.
We have a lot of good people in. I mean, look, if you look at our mayors and our city council members in the Utah County and our state legislators, most of them are all serving part-time. They have day jobs. They don't do it for the glory. Most of the time they just get yelled at by their city residents. They certainly don't do it for the money. We have a lot of great people here in our community.
Very cool. Very cool. That being said, if we can talk about your dad for a second. Your dad has been in professional sports over 40 years. I mean, obviously a hero here locally in Utah County, maybe not Salt Lake for those that are able to listen in on, but big hero here. What have you learned from him and how have you been able to apply that in your life, your career, your marriage, your family, fatherhood, like all those things?
I mean, I've learned a lot from him. I mean, he's my dad. He's had the most influence on me of anyone other than maybe my mom. But in terms of career, it's funny. Sometimes I feel like I said at the start, that I've had to kind of look elsewhere once I realized I didn't have his same athletic abilities or height for people to look to. But I actually love finding those things that kind of cross over, right? That made him great at in his career that translate to business or in this political role. One thing about my dad is he's had a pretty thick skin. I think you have to, right? I mean, in sports, The media can be brutal. The fans can be brutal. And he always just kind of took it in stride. And one of my favorite pictures that's kind of out there is, in the 80s when the Celtics and the Pistons had a big rivalry, there was a whole section. I don't know the age groups of everyone on here, but I mean, some people know during that era that, my dad was an annoying player. So most people just kind of hated him, right? I'm trying to imagine. It's like the role players on those championship teams, who are more of like a solid defender and they play their role. They tend to be like the most hated, right? Even if they're not the superstar. So there was a whole section of the Piston stands that wore shirts and had signs that says, "We hate Danny Ainge." And so one time during the playoffs, he went and grabbed one of those shirts from the stands and he wore it during warmups of the playoff game. And, I've just always, it never gets to him. And I think that's important. And then as a general manager, I think it's been more effective for him to kind of continue with that mindset because he does what he thinks is right for his team. If you look at general managers, a lot of the times they just are scared to make trades. They're scared to take a risk on a draft pick. They just want to keep their job, and it leads to poor decisions. And he hasn't been scared of criticism, and so he's made some major changes at times, and usually they've paid off, and so it's been helpful for him.
Oh, that trade with Philly, my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's talent. He has no fear. That's definitely it. And that along those lines, like one of the Gary Keller focuses is like you fail until you succeed, right? And the other thing is to embrace being uncomfortable or disruption. It's okay to be uncomfortable or disruptive, to be that annoyance, because that's really how you grow. And so that's pretty cool. So that being said, I know you grew up in Arizona most of the time, so you're a big Suns fan. Your dad did play in Phoenix. I still remember him hitting Mario Elie in the face with that deep pass. It was so fantastic. So are you a Celtics fan, a Suns fan, or the beloved John Stockton Utah Jazz fan?
Well, so my dad and my brother are still with the Celtics, so it's kind of family first. I'm a Celtics guy. Locally, I cheer for the Jazz anytime that they are not playing the Celtics. But the Suns, that was a fun era. There was a very short window in my life when my dad was not affiliated with the team, and during that is when I was the Steve Nash era Suns. That was my team for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was a good time. Recently you joined the National Guard. We read about it. You got an exemption, right? Because there is an age limit with the National Guard. You look 15, so it works out okay. Great. That's why I have to grow out my long hair so I look older. So I look 12 too. So by joining the National Guard, going through the training, understanding politics, and then implementing that in military, do you have a different perspective as far as business or service, politics, military, ever since doing that training and being a part of the National Guard?
Look, I'm still pretty early in my National Guard service, so I'm not sure I can sit here and kind of say that it's changed me in any significant way. It's certainly an honor to wear the uniform, and I wish that we all had that opportunity. One of the great experiences just being out in basic training is you have people from every background, every race, religion, sexual orientation, their politics, and you just put that aside, and everyone is wearing the uniform of the country, and you have each other's backs, and you have a common goal. And I think we need more of that right now. I think that too often right now in today's society, if we were to ask ourselves, we normally say, yeah, I believe in American values. But so often we live in worlds on social media or in our life where we're only surrounded by people who are like us or have the same views. And so we're so quick to just be so overly critical and dismissive of people who are different than us. And so I really enjoyed kind of having all those differences come together toward, serving in the military.
That's cool. One purpose, despite what your belief, faith, background, orientation, you have the same purpose and goal.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. Governor Herbert, who was a member of UCAR in Utah County, right, had said one of the great quotes, if your job is real estate, your business should be politics. Why do you believe politics are so relevant to real estate?
Well, I do think that for those involved in real estate, I mean, especially real estate development, but I would say any aspect, you have way more touch points really with government. I mean, just you look at our agenda or any city council's agenda, and a good chunk of those items are zoning and tax abatement and property related. So, I mean, it's just a huge part. And then you think about it from a real estate owner's perspective. I mean, if you have a large parcel, let me just say, I mean, somewhere in Utah County, North Utah County, all of a sudden you care a lot more about, okay, what are the agricultural, kind of green belt rules? You care about what is UDOT doing with this I-15 technology corridor, and how is that going to impact the attractiveness of my property? What is UTA doing in terms of public transit and options, for my property? And so I think that it naturally, and then if you think you're a commercial site and you want to bring offices, okay, now all of a sudden you care about how is the tech community doing? What are we doing to continue to attract new development and new companies to the state of Utah? So just naturally, the way that you're aligned as a property owner or with clients that are owning property, you have to stay involved and be abreast of all these changes.
Gary Keller, in his MREA book, we call it our Red Bible, right, talks about the 3 L's: leads, leverage, and listings. Clearly, listings are where you get leverage by gaining buyers and meeting people and all those things. With Utah being one of the hottest, if not the hottest market in the country for real estate, what are your growth predictions, or what are you seeing? What is being discussed, and what are the plans to handle that growth, right? You mentioned freeways and all these things in UDOT. So what do you see happening over the next 5 years, or even your final 2 years of term? And then how do you keep up with that growth?
Well, it's not going to stop. And I want to be careful here. I'm not necessarily projecting. I mean, I want to say our population growth and our family formation, that is going to burst out in a way that will continue and will continue unimpeded. But economically, I think we are subject to global economic forces. So who knows? I mean, we've had a very long, sustained period of economic growth, I think the longest in recent history. So I think we all need to be mindful of what could still happen. But I think that we are protected in some parts in our housing market from this. Obviously, low interest rates. I think the Fed has taken aggressive action, and we'll see if by the end of the day they take even more action. But here's why I feel strongly about the population growth will continue. First off, our organic population growth, meaning our residents have kids, at the highest rate in the nation. And so that's going to continue. We also have this inbound migration from other states that we've all experienced. All of your agents have a lot of home buyers, probably the best type of clients to have. And that is not going anywhere. I mean, these other states are going in the wrong direction. And the trend toward Utah, we're going to continue to see this migration, even just COVID. I'd be curious to see what the experience has been of some of your agents. I personally know a decent number of people, so I believe this would be a larger trend, who during COVID left big cities and were able to kind of work remote. And either they have worked out a gig where they can work remote, in which case they want to live in Utah rather than whatever city they're in, or even if they were not able to work that out with their employer, they just said, you know what, forget it. I'll find something else to do because I want to live the lifestyle. I want to be here. So I think we have that. And then lastly, because the economy is doing so well, the other trend that is real and it has a major impact that people don't track as often is these universities here in our state and specifically Utah County and UVU and Utah, or BYU and Utah Valley University, we have this huge student population, and we've always trained a lot of students, pushed them out into the workforce. But historically, a lot of them wanted to go to school here, but they didn't necessarily feel like all of their professional opportunities were available here. So a good chunk would return back where they're from, or go to a major market to get some work experience. But now, if you look at how that's gone year by year, way larger percentage of graduates of both institutions are just plugging into this workforce here. And so that's not going anywhere, which is good for our housing.
Yeah, that really falls in line again with our culture, that you stay in touch with your sphere of influence because they have kids that will end up getting homes. And it is nice to see that the people graduating from these universities are staying here because there is job opportunities that normally weren't here. Like that makes the job market even that much more powerful, especially for our agents. So where do you think the next hotspot is for residential real estate is then? I mean, how far can we grow in between these mountains? How far south, north? Like, what do you foresee as far as the next hotspot?
Well, do you know what's wild is, that west of Utah Lake is larger, or same size, similar in size to east of Utah Lake. And just imagine everything that we have right now is east. I mean, obviously Eagle Mountain, Saratoga are very real markets, and they've been growing, but well further down that corridor, all the way down to the south side of that, has so much room for growth and development. And with Prop 9, when we set up these geographic districts, they did some projections, and it's wild to look at that, to realize that at some point that area could become more of a population center than kind of Provo Orem, which is our center now. So, and then further south, obviously, I think people are going to push, the employment center of our state has already moved significantly further south, which allows for more commuting options for those who live in the south end of the county. So I think that's going to continue to flourish down in South Utah County. And then lastly, I think some of the infill areas, Vineyard that we hit on, with the lake, with the Geneva site, I think is going to continue to be a real hotspot.
So with politics and your experience in business, how is it different? How are they similar? How is business similar to politics, and how is politics different from business? Either a real estate standpoint or an investment standpoint, like what are the pros, cons, differences, similarities?
Well, I think we all probably have to acknowledge that I don't want to just give business a free pass. We've all been a part of dysfunctional teams or dysfunctional organizations. And so I'll acknowledge that on the front end, but hopefully we've all been a part of well-functioning teams and, effective organizations. And I certainly have in my business career. And I had a thesis about running that approach is needed more in government. And I can tell you after 2 years, it absolutely is. So if any of you ever want to get involved and run, please do, because we need more of that perspective at the table. Just to give you an example, I think in a well-functioning organization in business, you're used to being asked and asking tough questions. That's how you get better, right? Okay, how do we do this month? And you're accountable. Why were sales down? Why was profitability down? And those are pretty obvious questions. I think in an effective organization, those don't come with all sorts of difficult emotions. People are just used to that. And what I found in government, some of the boards that I sit on, is people are not used to being asked those types of basic questions. Why is performance like this? Why are you not getting a higher score on this metric? And oftentimes instead of answering it with data, they turn political. Oh, you must have a different ideology. It's like, no, actually, if we're going to do this activity, we might as well do it well. Leave ideology aside of whether I think this is the right form of government. And so I've had a lot of tough conversations like that. And we've had some reorganizations of these boards because I think it's important that, and I think taxpayers want to know that, and that their elected officials are fighting for that, to be leaner, to be more effective, more productive with taxpayer dollars. But here's the hard part is we don't have an incentive system like you do in a private business. The way that you kind of help manage that in a private business is you give some sort of performance evaluation, some bonus based on the performance, and it's harder to do that in taxpayer dollar situations. And so we need more of that approach.
That's where the insider trading comes into play, right? You get access to that. As long as you're in politics, you can have any kind of insider trading. Is that the incentive? I kid. No, and I love that aspect. I mean, that was one of the big things when COVID first came out was cut your budgets by 30%, right? Don't spend where you don't need to be spending. A dollar saved is significantly easier than a dollar earned. And so that's got to be a tough situation when you're controlling a budget and you have different opinions and people that don't have a business background in politics. But at the same time, understanding politics with your business can really increase your education. But
that's actually a good example, though, is imagine those incentives. So if you're a restaurant owner, I mean, this has been such a tough time for so many people, and it's, you know, we had one resort owner who had gone from 800 employees to 30 employees during the heart of this pandemic. And so like I'm deeply sympathetic to that, but this is actually one of the things that helped drive change. Is there was a lot of hotel and restaurant owners on this one particular board that we were working to have reform on. And they, in their personal and professional lives, were having to do cutbacks like the deepest that they've ever done. Like in some cases harder than the 2009, global recession. And then they looked at this entity that we were all trying to manage at the board level, and no action had been taken. At that point, no employees had been furloughed, nothing. And it's like, okay, because they all had stakeholders they had to report to drive to a bottom line. But this organization was kind of like, well, the government will just continue to subsidize what we do, so we're not going to change anything. So it's kind of trying to get that mindset is a little bit harder in the government context, but it can be done.
That's a uphill road. That's a definite challenge. You're a better man than I am as far as running up that hill. All right. So what can small business or real estate, agents do to have greater influence in like the public officials or in the politics or with the public?
I think doing forums is helpful. You guys are actually relatively well organized as an industry. I think that, we have a governor who's been a realtor and been involved in advocacy groups. You have strong lobbying organizations. And so I think no one really needs to tell realtors how to organize and get involved. I feel like you guys are great at that. Maybe an unorthodox answer would be, please just as residents get involved. We have a huge problem in our politics today. And what makes it worse is that people who show up to public meetings tend to only be those who have something to gain from an item on the agenda, or kind of extreme groups. And there could be 100 people in the room. And I tend not to be intimidated by this, but some public officials are like, wow, there's 100 people screaming about this. This must demonstrate that all of the community feels this way. So I'm gonna listen to this crowd. When in reality, it might be that those were the only 100 people in the whole county that felt that way. And there's 649,000 others who feel the opposite way. But the problem is as elected officials, we don't hear from, and I don't expect, I'm not like trying to give people work, but it's just hard because we don't hear from that reasonable, normal person who's building a business and raising their family, and they don't yell and scream. They don't send us emails. But I know they're a majority of this community, but finding a way to let your voice be heard and get involved, I think will help your elected officials be more reflective of the actual community instead of kind of extreme voices on either end of the spectrum.
It's always that noisy minority that tends to move the wheel further than the silent majority.
Yep, exactly.
That's when we have a few people that actually are on the board. One of the people on our executive leadership team is in Pleasant Grove, and so yeah, she's very passionate and love that. I think more people need to be more involved. So I'm just going to leave everybody your cell phone number, and they'll reach out to you personally, and then we'll go from there. You may hear from Salt Lake and Ogden and all that good stuff. So any other advice for real estate agents, their business organization? Like what is the best advice you could give somebody as someone who's been successful, but for real estate agents in their steps moving forward?
Wow, Tim. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've got agents who've been building their teams and their businesses for a long time. They know a lot better. I think one thing, like you said, is don't be scared to adapt. Don't be scared to innovate. I know that it can be hard sometimes to make that investment, especially if you're not don't have the most lucrative business right now. It's harder to like invest in that marketing. It's hard to invest in yourself a little bit. But if you don't, you're never going to get those leads, right? And I think that technology is even more important today in the real estate, in the realtor world. I know that there's a lot of pressure to adapt and innovate. There's some disrupting forces out there, but at the end of the day, people still need help with a home. They may not need you to drive them to 15 different homes anymore, and they may not need the glossy printout anymore because they might find it on an app. But when it comes to the transaction, I think they still need a lot of hand-holding, and a good realtor is still can earn their commission and be, and their clients be very grateful for the service. I think the only other thing I would say is, what I try to remember is just remember the global recession. And I think that kind of goes both ways. I don't necessarily think, I'm not making any predictions, but it's always a good reminder for those of us who have the scars, that you don't want to be over leveraged at any point. You don't want to have that level of confidence that you just think that you can time the market perfectly and that things can't ever go wrong. They can. But then also, I think it just is the other side of that is for other people who had some dry powder during 2009, 2010, or were willing to work hard and build a business during that time, realize that the opportunities were incredible. And so it's also not over leveraging yourself, but it's also being ready, keeping enough in the tank that that you can pounce when you see those types of opportunities. I think would be the only other thought I have.
Very cool. Well, in closing, unless we see some questions that want to go into property taxes and scream and yell, and hear from the silent or the noisy majority, how do you find balance? I mean, the county commissioner, you have your own business, your own investments, your family, you have 5 kids, right? Your wife and her family, who are fantastic people in your family, and, sports and all these things. Like, how do you find balance for not just that, but also Tanner's time and like your own mindfulness? Like that's a big thing with Gary Keller and this culture, is the 7 areas of life that we need to dedicate equal time to every aspect. So how does someone who's a public servant and deals with anger and animosity at the same time has to go home and be a happy father, happy husband, happy son, all those things? Like, how do you find the balance? What do you do to time block to do those things?
Well, to be honest, I don't know if I'm great at this. I think I tend to be more of a workaholic. I've always been really dedicated to the whatever goals I'm working toward. And just to give you a sense of that, I mean, whenever I ask this question, I think about back at a crazy time in our lives. My wife would be at home, and we had 4 kids, 4 and under at that time, because we had twins. And I was working at a large law firm, and that year I billed 2,100 hours. And that's not how many hours I worked, that's how many hours I billed. So I was essentially gone 24/7. And so my wife is just incredibly strong. And we've always been able to be aligned at what are the goals we're working toward. And so she's really kind of a rock, and has allowed us to maybe have a little bit more on our plates. But balance is still a huge deal. I think my faith is another rock that I lean on. You know, I always try to take a few minutes each day to just remember that and connection to a higher power, and what you're grateful for in life, I think is, and also taking a day, a week to do that, at least having some time to clear your head and be with others. And exercise is another one, I think, for me, that is a big outlet. And, you know, we all talk about it for our physical health, but I mean, for me, I think it's just as much mental health to really kind of clear your mind. And I think it's amazing when you're exercising regularly, how much easier it is to have the right mindset when you're dealing with challenges, and overcome those challenges, and not kind of let stress or discouragement kind of overpower you. And then I think, you know, maybe the last one that I would point to is, if you have a lot on your plate, you've got to just multitask sometimes. And in politics, that's been an area where we've really kind of done well, is taking my kids on the campaign trail with me, or, you know, a makeshift date night because my wife has to go to a political event. And, you know, there's been opportunities. The campaigning is not as fun, but it's actually more of the responsibilities. You know, when the sheriff's department every year does a, Christmas for kids in need in the community. And, you know, my responsibilities take me there, but when I also get to involve my family, I mean, it's kind of like it forces us to do things together that we may not have done otherwise. And so I think that's created a lot of opportunities, just kind of multitasking all of your responsibilities with your family. So I don't know, like I said, not the best at it, but those are some things that have helped us keep our sanity.
Very cool. And I will say this about Tanner, like, Tanner is able to keep a cool head amongst high pressure, and nothing, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but I have to, your CNN interview when you had to adjourn the meeting based upon fire codes and the noisy minority that was there, right? The mask and the anti-mask. And I think CNN brought you on to show, like, this bad side of Utah County is this, tinfoil hat side, and your ability to just slow down, take a breath, and respond in a way that was so positive that I wish we would have done this interview a week before, when the Saratoga Springs fire was so rampant, that the officers and people that were saying, we don't need more food, we don't need more money, we don't need more trailers, like, we have enough volunteers and things that will provide for that. And so you are a very good example as far as taking adversity and, stress and challenges and able to calmly resolve them. And that is a talent that I think real estate agents have become. When you have a chaotic, you're balancing lending and appraisals and inspections and all these things that are chaotic, like the ability to handle that in a calm, respective way is such a gift.
Wait, you mean your clients get worked up sometimes around the closing?
Yeah, clearly not enough. I don't see any drama on my plate at all. So no, they're fantastic. So Tanner, thanks so much for taking the time. The state thanks you, and we look forward to seeing you. I think I was promised vice president position down the road, but my only issue is if they start going down the path of my background and history, then you'll lose.
One of you guys needs to get ready to run for county mayor if Prop 9 passes. So there we go.
Oh, Clay, I nominate Clay. Tanner, thanks so much, brother. I appreciate it. We really appreciate your time. I know how crazy and busy your schedule is and hectic, and this recording is going to the entire state on top of those that are on just in this office that you see, but also throughout the states. We appreciate your time and spending time with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you guys.
Thank you.